The discovery? The night shift at Outpost Kepler-7 was supposed to be routine. Zara Vex adjusted her violet-hued fingers across the console's glowing interface, her large amber eyes scanning the endless stream of sensor data that painted the outer rim's darkness. The 3 moons of Kepler cast pale light through the observation deck's reinforced transparent steel, creating dancing shadows across her azure skin. "Another quiet evening in paradise," she muttered, her melodic voice carrying the slight trill common to her species, the Velrani. Her elongated ears twitched with boredom as stellar dust and distant asteroids populated her screens with their familiar signatures. Commander Thane Korik entered the communications bay, his heavy footsteps announcing his presence. The Krillian commander stood nearly 7 feet tall, his granite-gray skin marked with the ritual scars of his warrior caste. His 4 arms moved with practiced efficiency as he checked the duty reports, while his deep-set red eyes surveyed the quiet control room. Part 2, The Awakening Captain. Marcus Reed stood before the massive viewport of the flagship Retribution, watching the distant galaxy grow larger with each passing hour. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency around him, but his steel-gray eyes held memories that stretched back 20 years. Memories of the day humanity had been forced to flee. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached from the science station, her dark hair pulled back in the practical style of a shipborne researcher. Her olive complexion had never felt natural sunlight, only the artificial glow of starship corridors. "Marcus, the advanced scouts report successful infiltration of their outer sensor networks. We know their defensive positions." "Good." Marcus turned from the viewport, his weathered face showing the weight of command. At 45, he had spent half his life in the black between galaxies, preparing for this moment. And the civilian evacuation ships? Still 3 days behind us. Admiral Chen's convoy is maintaining radio silence as ordered. Elena moved closer, her hand briefly touching his arm, a gesture that spoke of years of shared burdens. "Are you certain about this approach? There might be another way." Marcus studied her face, seeing the compassion that had sustained him through the darkest years of exile. They had never spoken of the feelings that had grown between them during the long journey, both knowing that duty came first. But in moments like this, when the weight of their species' future pressed down on them, he allowed himself to notice the way her eyes softened when she looked at him. "They cast us out, Elena. Called us too violent, too unpredictable for their enlightened galaxy." His voice carried the bitterness of old wounds. "They destroyed our colonies, scattered our fleets, and told us never to return." "That was 300 years ago," she said quietly. "The species that exiled us are mostly extinct. These aliens never knew humans existed, but they inherited our exile. They built their peace on our absence." Marcus walked to the tactical display where red dots marked human ships and blue indicated alien positions. "Look at what they've created. A galaxy-spanning alliance built on the myth that dangerous species like us burn ourselves out." Elena joined him at the display, standing close enough that he could smell her subtle perfume, a luxury she'd saved for moments when hope seemed possible. "What if we proved them wrong? What if we showed them that exile taught us wisdom instead of just vengeance?" Before Marcus could answer, Commander Sarah Okafor's voice crackled through the comm. "Captain Reed to the bridge. We're receiving signals from Kepler-7 outpost. They know we're here." Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. The moment they'd prepared for across centuries of dark space had arrived. As they headed toward the bridge, Elena caught his hand briefly. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "we face it together." Marcus squeezed her fingers, allowing himself one moment of purely human connection before duty reclaimed him. "Together," he agreed, though both knew that the next few hours would determine whether humanity's return meant redemption or war. The bridge fell silent as they arrived, all eyes turning to their captain. Outside the viewports, alien space stretched before them, a galaxy that had forgotten the species now poised at its borders, ready to remind them that some legends refused to stay buried. First contact. The neutral asteroid station Haven's Rest floated in the void between human and alien fleets, its docking bays barely large enough to accommodate the historic meeting. Ambassador Crix Valdorn of the Galactic Collective adjusted his ceremonial robes, the silver threading catching light from the station's ancient illuminators. His pale blue skin bore the intricate tattoos of a career diplomat, while his six-fingered hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the magnitude of the moment. Lieutenant Jace Turner guided his shuttle through the station's magnetic field, his hands steady on the controls despite the enormity of his mission. At 28, he was humanity's youngest combat pilot to survive the Void Wars, his brown hair still bearing the regulation cut that marked him as military. His green eyes studied the alien vessels through his cockpit, comparing them to intelligence reports that were 3 centuries out of date. The docking procedure completed in silence, both sides following protocols hastily drafted for this unprecedented encounter. Jace emerged from his shuttle in full dress uniform, the blue and gold of humanity's colonial fleet pristine despite decades of storage. His hand rested instinctively near his sidearm, though weapons had been forbidden in the neutral zone. Crix waited in the station's central chamber, his reptilian features composed in what he hoped appeared welcoming rather than terrified. When the human entered, both beings froze, seeing their supposed enemy face to face for the first time. "I am Ambassador Crix Valdorn," he said, his translator rendering the words in crisp human standard. "Welcome to Haven's Rest, Lieutenant Jace Turner, Colonial Fleet." Jace's response was formal, but his eyes studied the alien with curiosity rather than hostility. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting." They sat across from each other at the station's simple conference table, the weight of galactic politics pressing down on them. Yet as the hours passed, discussing logistics and protocols for the larger negotiations to come, something unexpected began to develop. "Your people," Crix said during a break in formal discussions, "the records describe you as savage. But you speak of honor, of protection for the innocent." Jace leaned back in his chair, his formal posture relaxing slightly. "The records are old, Ambassador. Humanity has had centuries to grow, to learn from our mistakes." He paused, studying Crix's earnest expression. "What do the records say about why we were exiled? That you fought wars that consumed star systems. That you refused to submit to galactic law." Crix's voice grew quieter. "But they don't say what drove you to fight." "They attacked our civilian colonies first," Jace said, his voice carrying old pain. "We fought because they gave us no choice between war and extinction." As the station's artificial night cycle began, they found themselves talking not as representatives of their species, but as individuals sharing stories. Crix spoke of his homeworld's crystal cities and singing forests. Jace described Earth's blue oceans and the grandmother who had taught him to fly. When Crix mentioned his concern for his daughter, who had just started academy training, something shifted in the atmosphere. Jace found himself noticing the way the alien's eyes reflected light, how his careful gestures spoke of genuine emotion rather than political calculation. "She wants to be an explorer," Crix said, a father's pride evident in his voice. "To see new worlds, make contact with new species." "That's what I wanted too," Jace admitted. "Before the war, before exile, I wanted to see the galaxy, meet its people." Their eyes met across the table, and both realized they were no longer seeing the enemy. They were seeing someone who shared their dreams, their hopes for the future. Divided loyalties. The protests had begun on a dozen worlds simultaneously, sparked by leaked footage of the human fleet's arrival. Nira Zelthane stood before the collective assembly, her silver hair flowing freely in defiance of formal protocol. Her turquoise skin seemed to glow with inner fire as she addressed the packed chamber, her voice carrying the passion that had made her the galaxy's most prominent peace activist. "We stand at a crossroads," she declared, her hands gesturing to the holographic displays showing both fleets. "We can choose the path of fear and repeat the cycles of violence that marked our ancestors, or we can prove that civilization has truly evolved." In the military section, Hardline voices shouted opposition, but Neera's words had struck a chord with many younger delegates. As the session ended in chaos, she slipped away to a small cafe in the station's civilian quarter, her heart heavy with the weight of opposition. Sergeant Cole Blackwood sat alone at a corner table, his massive frame somehow making the chair look delicate. The human Marine had arrived on the station as part of the security detail, his dark skin bearing scars from void combat and his black eyes constantly scanning for threats. But when Neera entered the cafe, something in her determined stride and defiant beauty caught his attention. She ordered tea and sat nearby, not noticing the human until he spoke quietly. That was brave. "What you said in there?" Neera looked up, startled to see the human soldier. Her first instinct was fear. He was easily twice her size, clearly built for war. But his voice held gentleness that surprised her. "You were watching the assembly?" she asked, her hand trembling slightly as she lifted her cup. "Part of my job." Cole's smile transformed his intimidating features. "But I would have watched anyway. Not many people willing to speak truth to power like that." They talked through the afternoon, cautiously at first, then with growing openness. Cole spoke of losing his brother in the early skirmishes before exile, while Neera described her parents' death in the Rim Wars that had consumed her homeworld. "Violence only breeds more violence," she said, leaning closer across the small table. "There has to be another way." "Sometimes there is," Cole agreed, his large hand covering hers on the table. "But sometimes people don't give you a choice." Their relationship developed in secret meetings across the station's hidden corners. In maintenance tunnels and abandoned observation decks, they found moments of intimacy that transcended species barriers. When Cole held her close in the darkness, when her lips met his in desperate kisses that spoke of hope and fear intertwined, they created a small universe where human and alien differences melted away, but their worlds were pulling them apart. Cole received orders to return to the fleet as tensions escalated. Neera faced death threats from alien extremists who saw her peace activism as treason. On their last night together, they lay in each other's arms in a small quarters Neera had rented under an assumed name. Her head rested on his chest, listening to his heartbeat while stars wheeled past the viewport. "If war comes," she whispered, "we'll be on opposite sides." Cole's arms tightened around her. "Then we have to make sure war doesn't come." "How?" she asked, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "By proving that some things are stronger than hate," he said, tilting her chin up to meet his eyes. "By showing them what we found together." They made love with desperate tenderness, knowing that dawn might tear them apart forever. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's warmth, they carried the seed of hope that love might yet triumph over the momentum of war. The choice. The two fleets faced each other across a gulf of empty space that seemed to pulse with potential energy. On one side, the sleek vessels of the Galactic Collective formed defensive formations, their hulls gleaming with the advanced technology of a peaceful civilization suddenly forced to prepare for war. On the other side, the angular human warships held position like patient predators, their dark armor bearing the scars and modifications of centuries in exile. Captain Marcus Reed stood on his bridge, watching the tactical displays with the weight of species extinction on his shoulders. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, ready to execute whatever orders he gave. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood beside him, her presence a comfort even as they faced the possibility of galactic war. "Sir," Communications Officer Torres reported, "the collective fleet is requesting one final diplomatic meeting." Marcus nodded grimly. "Tell them I'll meet with their commander in 1 hour, neutral ground." Elena touched his arm. "Marcus, this is our chance. Don't let the past poison the future." Across the void, Ambassador Crix Valdorn prepared for what might be his final mission. His shuttle carried not just himself, but Neera Zelthane, whose peace movement had gained momentum even as fleets prepared for battle. The human shuttle approaching their position carried Lieutenant Jace Turner and, unexpectedly, Sergeant Cole Blackwood. The meeting took place aboard the same asteroid station where first contact had occurred, now serving as the stage for humanity's last chance at redemption. As the representatives gathered, personal connections immediately complicated political positions. Jace and Crix exchanged glances that spoke of hours of conversation and growing respect. Nira and Cole's reunion was electric with barely controlled emotion, their love evident despite the desperate circumstances. "We have demands," Marcus began, his voice carrying the authority of humanity's exile. "Reparations for the colonies destroyed. Recognition of our right to exist in this galaxy. Guarantees that we will never again be cast out." "And if we refuse?" asked Admiral Theiss, the collective's military commander, her crystalline features hard as stone. "Then we take what was always ours," Marcus replied coldly. The room fell silent until Nira spoke. "There is another way." She stood, moving to the center of the room where human and alien representatives could all see her. "I propose a new compact. Not one species dominating another, but true partnership. Humanity brings strength and determination that our galaxy has lost. We bring wisdom and cooperation that you've been forced to rediscover." "Pretty words," Admiral Theiss scoffed. "But humans cannot be trusted." "Then let us prove you wrong," Cole said, standing beside Nira. "Some of us have found something worth more than revenge." Jace moved to join them, followed reluctantly by Crix. "The ambassador is right. We've spent weeks talking, learning about each other. We're not the enemies our ancestors made us." Marcus studied the group before him, his own people standing with aliens, bonds of understanding replacing centuries of mistrust. Elena's hand found his, squeezing gently. "What are you proposing?" he asked quietly. "A trial period," Nira said. 1 year of joint operations, human ships patrolling with collective vessels, shared colonies, exchange programs. And if it fails? Then humanity earns the right to an honorable place in this galaxy through service rather than conquest. The debate that followed stretched through the night, but gradually opposition crumbled. The sight of humans and aliens working together, of love transcending species barriers, proved more powerful than any threat or demand. As dawn broke over the asteroid station, both fleets began standing down their weapons. The galaxy that had forgotten humanity now prepared to welcome them home, not as conquerors returning for vengeance, but as long-lost children finally coming back to a family they had never really left. In the observation deck, Nira and Cole stood hand in hand, watching their people's ships begin to intermingle in formations that spoke of cooperation rather than confrontation. Around them, human and alien crew members worked together, building the foundation of a future none of them had dared to imagine. The forgotten fleet had returned not to destroy, but to heal. And in the space between stars, love had proven stronger than the weight of history.